Okay, I'm back with my star block. I picked this green color. It's a Floriani 218. All right, I have my 7.5 by 7.5 background block. I put the fusible woven on the back. I cut my piece of batting. All right, I have my stabilizer in the hoop, which you'll see in a second when I switch the cameras over. And this is my fabric that the star is going to be made from, but it's applique. So I did not cut out my square. I'm just going to lay this on there once I get my placement line. All right, so I'm looking at star 1. Okay, and the star 1 on the quilt, if I look at the quilting piece of it, is block 29. And then if I go to block 29, I need the Christmas 8 6x6 horizontal design, and it's KDQ098 Christmas. All right, so I have that loaded up in my machine. So I loaded the quilting design up first. Then I opened up the actual embroidery file, which is the star. This star is the same star. Okay, it's the same quilt embroidery file to do all 3 stars. We're just changing the colors. Okay, so I have that loaded up on the machine. The first thing I'm going to be doing is quilting. So I will be loading my white thread in right now with my stabilizer in the hoop, and I'm using again I like a poly mesh cutaway stabilizer. It's, you know, I want to say medium to light. I like using it because it's like nice and soft, and it's not real heavy or anything like that when I go to start everything. And let's see if I switch over. All right, you guys can kind of see the hoop. If I show you my screen, it's going to flicker, but it is there. I have my quilting background and I have the star. Okay, and again, I'm using a pretty big hoop, a 9x9 hoop, because that's the size that I have. My next smallest size from that is a 6x10 or a 5x7, and that does not fit. All right, so if I slide back over so you don't have to look at that flickering screen, I'm gonna hit start. And the first thing, because I did the block by block, right, the first thing it's going to do is show me where to place my batting. So it's just going to do me a square. So you have to remember when you do your quilting that if you load that file up, however many stitches are in that embroidery file, that's going to change your actual embroidery file itself. When you think you're at embroidery file number 1, you might be at number 5 by the time we get to start doing the star itself. All right, so you have to remember we have so many steps before we get there. All right, so here is my batting. All right, so I'm gonna hit start again. This is going to tack down our batting. If you cut it pretty close, you won't have as much to trim, right? Because the whole idea of doing block by block is not to have the batting in the seam allowance. So my batting's cut pretty close, and I'm using a little bit of, I want to say, some scrap batting, but it's not really scrap. I do long arm quilting, so when I'm done with that, I always have extra on the sides and the top and the bottom. I'm trying to use up those scraps real quick from doing that. So that's what I have on here. So when this is done, you're going to actually trim that extra batting away, okay? Because again, we want to get that out of the seam allowance. And I don't have very much to trim. Apologize if my hand gets in the way. because I cut it pretty close to the size it was supposed to be. All right, so there we go. So that's the first 2 steps. The next step is stitching where to place your fabric. And it actually is going to, well, stitch right over. We'll see. Nope. It goes about 1/4 inch around. So your fabric is, your placement line for your fabric is bigger than your batting. All right. Now, they told us to cut an 8.5 by 8.5. Remember, I only cut a 7.5 by 7.5, and then even my fusible woving is smaller than that. So I have a line about 1/4 inch around all the way, and all I want to do is I want to center my square. So I like to lay my fabric up there, and I like to look at the right and left hand side. I don't know if it's really that dark, if it's the way my screen is. And I like to line up, the 2 sides first, and then pull it down a little bit, and then flip up this side and look at the top and the bottom. And I have way more at the top than at the bottom. Okay, and then I'll flip over the side again, and I'll look at how much I have at the top, how much I have at the bottom, how much I have at the right, and how much I have on the left. Okay? So now that I think that's pretty much centered, I'm going to hit start, and this is going to tack down, all right, this background fabric for us. And it is using a really, like a basting stitch to do this. And the reason it's using that basting stitch is if this does actually pop or I miscut this square later, I can pick those stitches out without any problem if they do show up, on the top of the quilt and they don't end up in the seam. All right, the next step is the actual quilting, and it's doing some stockings going across here, all right? Now, the stockings are kind of one way, so later on you want to be careful when you do assemble the block that you have your quilting all going in the right direction. And again, I am doing the quilting in white. I'm just going to pick white for all the blocks right now, and we'll see how that goes. So this is the quilting block by block. So it's going to do all the quilting and keep it within the block size. All right. Whereas clear blue tiles, you can keep, you can put block by block, blocks together, and it looks like it flows even though they're not connected. With this one, I did block by block because it gives me the placement lines for putting that batting down. Clear blue tiles does not put your batting down, all right? It doesn't give you a placement line to put that batting down. So it's just doing my quilting here. And you'll see when it does this line, it comes all the way straight down and then starts the next row. This line that it did off to the right-hand side that went straight down that side, that will go into the seam allowance. So you're not going to see it when you're all done with your project. Okay, now clear blue tiles will not do any stitches like that. Because it's expecting any stitch that it put down, you're going to see in your quilt. So you have to be careful if you pick this file to do, and you thought, I can just do this, next to each other. It's not going to work because you're going to end up with these straight lines connecting the rows together. And you're not really going to like that, in your finished quilt. So in this case, those lines will end up in the seam allowance. So the size of the block we picked for the quilting was 6 by 6. That was in the name. That 6 by 6 is identifying the finished size of the block once it's all sewn into your project. Okay, so that's what that means. I'm almost done with the stockings. I'm letting it stitch out so at least you can see how long my quilting is taken. I think the star blocks are different background quilting. so I can kind of look real quick. I don't think they're all the same. So let's see, block 33 here at the top. This star up here at the top is number 33, and that one is going to do winter as its background. So I will have to like delete the file and reload the quilting, right? Design back in with the star to do, you know, the second and third star, just so you know, because the quilting is different. All right, so I'm loading that green in right now because the next thing up on my screen is the actual placement line of the star. So I am going to stitch that all in the same green, the placement line, the tack down line, and the decorative quilting. I do have a white bobbin in. To me, I'm using white fabric right here, so I would normally put white bobbin in, but I'm probably going to use a white bobbin for the whole project, just so you know. All right, so I'm going to hit start. I'm going to stitch the placement line for the star. And if you remember, it told us for the star applique to cut a 6x6 piece of fabric. And I did not do that, right? I just, when it comes to applique, I don't like to do that. Now, if this was basic, Kimberbell basic fabric, I would go to my stash and see if I had a piece that was about 6x6 that it would fit over top of this applique placement line. But this is like new fabric for a cup of cheer, so I don't have any of this in my stash. But some of the fabrics that I have in my stash, you know, from doing other quilts, you know, leftovers and things, I like to go dig that stash pile out. And I'm going to throw my extra to the top. And that way, I'm going to line up the right-hand side of the star and the bottom of the star. And I can see it, and I know that there's enough fabric there at the points that it's going beyond the point, but not like, you know, 3 inches beyond the point. So I'm just flipping it up a little bit, catching that edge. Okay, this is what my star is going to look like. It's, you know, done in this fabric. So I'm going to hit start, and now it's going to tack down my star. All right. So the first line was the placement. The second line is the tack down. And then the third stitch, or, you know, embroidery stitch here will be that decorative, like satin kind of stitch that it does for the star. There goes my star. It is going around twice. So I'm going to trim my fabric close to the stitch line, but I don't want to cut the stitch line, okay? Just want to trim it close. Okay, now I have a function on my machine that will allow me to pull, like force my hoop forward a little bit so that I can do my trimming. I don't know if that helps or not. All right, so I am just going to start my trimming right now. So you might see my hand. I apologize for that. Again, if you pop your hoop out of your machine to do your trimming, please put it on a flat surface, right? Don't lay it on your lap. You don't want to like push your project out of the hoop, because then it'll be hard to realign it. So lay it on a clipboard. If you're, you know, don't have a flat surface, lay it on your table. You know, if you're going to pop it out. If you can move your hoop like I can, I am working on a hard table under here. All right, because I have an extension table on my sewing machine. that gives, you know, that helps me have more of a flat surface that I'm working with while I'm doing my sewing. And normally I leave the table there on, leave the table on all the time, but the main part of the table is really when I'm doing, quilting using my hoops. Because it just allows me all this extra space that, that my quilt can like hang over and not put so much drag on my hoop. Now, if I'm just quilting normally, doing free motion quilting with my machine, I will actually put my machine down inside of my table. That's here, and I have a insert then that makes this entire table the same all the way around, and I have another table in the back that flips up from this table so that I have a really big, huge flat surface to work with. Oh, I don't know if you saw that. I forgot this one little piece right here. All right, so I'm gonna look at my fabric here. And to me, this is like almost a 4.5 inch square and not a 6 inch square. But I didn't want to cut it smaller. I'd rather do what I just did here. I just have this little bit here. Now, if I want to square this up later because I want to use this fabric for something, fine. But maybe I need this little piece of the fabric on the end. So I like doing my applique and just cutting it when I get to it. That's what I like to do. All right, so that's why I did not pre-cut that piece. And again, I was very careful when I placed this down that I really kind of stuck it right into that corner. All right, we are on the last step of the star. So when I hit my hoop again, it's going to move it back into place. And it's going to create that star all now with thread. Okay, so the thread is going to be what divides all these up that makes it look like it's been quilted together. So that is the next step. It is 3,000 or plus stitches, all right, and it's going to take about 5 minutes to do. And it does start in the center of the star, and it starts working its way out. And remember what I said, this decorative stitch here, that is the reason why you wanted to use the green thread to do the placement and the tack down of your fabric. I thought this was a little bit of a different stitch than it is. It's more like the like a flower or star type stitch going around. So this is the star block, and again, you do 3 of them. Now, when this is done stitching, I'll look at it, make sure I like the way that it looks and everything before I take it out of the hoop. And I probably won't take it out of the hoop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my stabilizer down to where I can put my next star in, and I can stitch that out. So therefore, like I didn't cut the stabilizer and have all this extra at the top that I'm wasting. So I always usually leave my stabilizer on the roll attached. That's how I do it. And again, most of the time I do it that way because I have to use a lot bigger hoop than I need for the project. And I just hate wasting the stabilizer if I did cut it to the size of my hoop. It does look nice. And, you know, remember, all the quilting is done in the background underneath, so it's all behind. I did not put the fusible woven on my applique material. There is some fraying. I thought this covered up a little bit better than this decorative design that it has. So if you do not want, excuse me, your fabric to fray underneath, then put the fusible woven on the star fabric. So if you were going to do that, then yes, I would probably cut my star out. It suggests a 6x6 square. I think that's a little big, but the Kimberbell always makes you cut it bigger so that it's less likely that your piece will be too small to fit. Yeah, it's almost done. Now, when this is done, your finished size of this square is 6.5 by 6.5, and I believe your 6.5 by 6.5 is going to be a little bit bigger than this basting line that went around. So what I like to do is I like to use that basting line as a guide when I go to cut my square, whether I use a traditional ruler to cut my square or I use the pop ruler. I like to make sure that that outside line is the same distance on all four sides, and then I'll cut my square to size. Now, I don't normally cut my squares as I go. I normally cut them all at the end. That's up to you if you want to cut it as you go. All right, that is block number 1. Okay, so this is the first block I'm doing. It's the first embroidery design in the book. And we do 3 of these. So the other 2 have a different background fabric, and they have a different quilting, and they have a different star color. So you just have to get those colors out. Do the same thing, cut your square, cut your batting, find your background. Now, if you didn't do the background quilting, you would have just laid your fabric on here, did your star, and it would have done the quilting. There would be no basting line going around it to tack this fabric down. You could have just laid batting behind it and laid your fabric down and stitched your star. If you have the capability of doing an outline around your embroidery, that could have tacked it down and you would still have batting back there. That's up to you. But I'm just, doing it the way normally Kimberbell would actually do it with the quilting. The quilting design is 6 by 6. You could use any design you want. You can go use your if you bought the essential pack, you could go use the fall or the winter design in there. I think it's snowflakes. You could use all swirls. You could do all the quilting on all of these blocks with the same thing. You do not have to use the cup of cheer quilting if you didn't want to. So you would just go to your clear blue tiles. You would look through there and say, oh, I want to use the scroll one. I want to use the winter one. And you just needed to know that you needed the 6 by 6 size. So you just have to open the 6 by 6 and you can quilt that first and then do the star over top. So just be aware, you're just looking for a quilting design that finishes with a 6 by 6. All right, so thanks for being with watching my video for the first star. If you didn't buy your quilt kit yet, you can always contact the store, So What Incorporated in Delaware. There'll probably be you probably saw this video on our Facebook page or our YouTube, so you're aware of where we're at. But we do have the cup of cheer. So give us a call if you would like it and you didn't purchase it yet. Thanks.